In the heart of an ancient, forgotten town stood a shop that had been lost to time. It was not a place one would find easily, hidden away on a narrow, crumbling street where the air felt colder than it should. The locals never spoke of it directly, but all knew its dark reputation. It was said to be run by an old man, Mr. Aldwin, a figure as mysterious as the shop itself. No one ever saw him leave the shop, and no one could recall a time when he hadn't been there. Those few who ventured into his shop were never the same afterward, their eyes haunted, their spirits broken. The shop was known as the Haunted Shop of Despair, and it was far from an ordinary store. One evening, a young woman named Lily, desperate to escape the weight of her grief, wandered into the town, her heart aching from a series of personal losses that had left her hollow. She had heard whispers of a place where one could find relief from sorrow, where deep pain could be forgotten. The rumors spoke of an object in the shop that could cleanse a soul, rid one of the burdens that had twisted the mind and crushed the heart. Lily, tired of living with her pain, sought out this mysterious store. She entered it with hope glimmering in her eyes, though she didn't understand what it was that waited for her inside. The door creaked as she stepped into the shop, the dim interior casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and move. The shop was filled with oddities, dusty books with no titles, masks with unsettling features, and objects that seemed out of place, as if they had been pulled from another world. At the back of the shop stood Mr. Aldwin, his pale face illuminated by the faint light that seeped through the grimy windows. His gaze was intense, as though he could see into the very depths of her soul, and he welcomed her with a slow, knowing smile. There was something unnervingly familiar about him, as though he had been waiting for her. Lily, her heart racing, approached him. She didn't know what she was searching for, but the feeling of being drawn to this place was undeniable. She asked him if he could help her forget, if there was something in his shop that could erase the pain that had been suffocating her for so long. Mr. Aldwin's smile widened, and he nodded. He told her there was something, but it was not something that could be obtained easily. He promised that what he offered would take her pain away, but she would have to surrender herself to it completely. He led her to the back of the shop, where an ancient mirror hung on the wall. Its frame was tarnished, and its surface was cracked, as though it had been through centuries of torment. Lily stared at her reflection in it, but something about the way she looked back at herself unsettled her. Her image seemed distorted, as if the mirror was showing her something more than just her appearance. Mr. Aldwin, his voice low and hypnotic, instructed her to place her hands on the mirror. He promised that the mirror would reflect her deepest sorrow, and in doing so, it would take it away. With a mixture of fear and hope, Lily placed her hands on the cold surface of the mirror. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, a sudden chill swept through the room, and her reflection began to change. It was as though the mirror was alive, twisting and warping her image. The woman staring back at her was no longer just Lily, she was something far darker, her face twisted in agony. The pain of her past, the death of her mother, the betrayal of a lover, the crippling loneliness, flooded back into her mind, more vivid than ever before. It was not just a memory, it was as if she was reliving every moment, every wound. The air grew colder, the shadows seemed to stretch toward her, and she could hear whispering voices in the corners of the room. Her mind raced, but the mirror held her captive. It was pulling something from her, something she had not known she was capable of feeling. The whispers grew louder, and the faces of her regrets began to appear in the glass. Her mother's face, twisted in silent scream, stared at her with accusing eyes. Her ex-lover's face flickered in the mirror, grinning in a way that sent chills down her spine. But then something else appeared. Something that made her blood run cold. It was herself, but not the Lily who had entered the shop. This version of her was something monstrous. Her face was contorted in pain, but it was also full of malice, of darkness, a twisted version of herself that had been buried deep inside her soul. She wanted to pull away, but the mirror held her tightly, trapping her in its depths. The shop seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing together, the floor trembling beneath her feet. It was as though the entire place had come alive, feeding off the terror and sorrow that had been unleashed. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist, taking on shapes that were both familiar and foreign, figures from her past and figures from her darkest nightmares. The whispers in the air became louder, sharper, and the mirror's reflection began to distort, turning into something grotesque. Lily's screams echoed through the shop as the air around her thickened with darkness. Mr. Aldwin stood motionless, watching, his smile never fading. He had seen it all before. He had seen countless souls like Lily's, lost, desperate, seeking relief from their pain. But what they didn't realize was that the mirror did not release them from their despair. It consumed them. It made them face the darkest corners of their minds and then took everything, leaving nothing but a hollow shell behind. Lily's cries grew weaker, her form becoming more translucent, as if the mirror was pulling her into itself. And then, with one final scream, she vanished, her body no longer solid, her soul consumed by the mirror. No one ever saw Lily again. Some say she was absorbed into the mirror, her face now a permanent part of the haunting reflection. Others say her soul wandered the shop, trapped between the realm of the living and the dead. But one thing was certain, she was lost forever, a part of the shop's collection of torment. As the years passed, more people wandered into the shop. They came looking for relief, for answers, but they, too, were consumed by the mirror's power. Some sought to forget heartbreak, others sought to erase guilt, and a few simply wanted to escape the darkness that had overtaken their lives. But in the end, the shop took them all. One by one, they disappeared, their faces now part of the mirror's tortured reflection. Mr. Aldwin, the shopkeeper, continued his work, his purpose unchanging. He was a keeper of sorrow, a collector of souls. Those who entered the shop were never seen again, their lives forever entwined with the cursed relics that filled the shop. And the mirror, always hungry, waited for the next soul to step through the door. In the town of Black Hollow, the shop remains, its door forever closed to the outside world. But if you wander too close, if you listen carefully, you can hear the faintest whispers calling from within, a soft voice beckoning you into the darkness, promising to take away your pain, if only you are willing to pay the price.